Greenland towns are disappearing under snow right now, and what happens next reveals something terrifying about life in the Arctic that nobody talks about. Streets vanish in minutes, entire communities cut off from the world, and people trapped in a frozen prison where one wrong move means death. This is not a disaster movie. This is Tuesday in Greenland. You think you understand snow. You've seen blizzards on the news, maybe shoveled your driveway a few times. But what's happening in Greenland's coastal settlements right now operates on a completely different scale. And by the end of this video, you'll never look at snow the same way again. Because when snow drifts block streets and access routes in the Arctic, it doesn't just inconvenience people, it rewrites the rules of survival itself. Picture this. You wake up in Ilulissat, Greenland's third largest town with roughly 4,700 residents. You go to bed with clear streets. 8 hours later, your front door won't open. Not because it's locked, because there's a wall of snow pressed against it like concrete. Your windows show nothing but white. The street that was there yesterday? Gone. The road to the airport? Buried. The path to the hospital? Doesn't exist anymore. And here's the part that makes your stomach drop. This happened while you slept. In less than half a day, the entire infrastructure of human movement just stopped existing. Now you might be thinking, well, they have snowplows, right? They'll clear it. And that's where this gets interesting, because you're about to discover why Arctic snow is fundamentally different from what you've experienced, and why the solutions that work everywhere else completely fail in Greenland. First, understand the enemy. When meteorologists in Greenland issue warnings about heavy snow and strong winds, they're not talking about a foot of powder and some gusty breezes. They're describing a meteorological event called a pitarak. That's the Greenlandic word for a phenomenon that combines hurricane-force winds with continuous snowfall, creating conditions so extreme that survival outdoors drops to minutes, not hours. Wind speeds regularly exceed 100 miles per hour. But it's not the wind alone that's deadly. It's what the wind does to the snow. In most places, snow falls and accumulates gradually. You get warning. You see it building up. In Greenland, katabatic winds roar down from the ice sheet at insane speeds, picking up existing snow and mixing it with fresh precipitation. This creates something called snow drift, but that gentle term completely fails to capture what's actually happening. Imagine a horizontal avalanche traveling at 70 miles per hour, composed of millions of tons of ice crystals moving like a liquid, filling every gap, every street, every space between buildings. The snow doesn't fall. It attacks. And this is where things get truly wild, because the speed at which these drifts form defies logic. A street can go from completely clear to buried under 15 feet of compacted snow in under 2 hours. Not loose, fluffy snow that you can dig through. Compacted snow that's been compressed by hurricane winds into something with the density of ice. Some drifts become so hard that snowplows can't cut through them. They literally break the equipment. So what do people do? How do you survive when your town becomes inaccessible to the outside world? This is where you need to understand something crucial about Greenlandic settlements. These aren't cities with backup infrastructure and endless resources. Most towns are tiny, isolated, and completely dependent on a single access route. When that route gets blocked, there's no plan B. The town of Tasiilaq, home to roughly 2,000 people, sits on an island accessible only by helicopter or boat. When snow drifts block the helipad and ice prevents boats from landing, the town is completely cut off. Food supplies can't arrive. Medical emergencies can't be evacuated. People are on their own. But wait, you might think, surely the government has emergency protocols? And here's where you discover the brutal mathematics of Arctic logistics. Greenland is the world's largest island, with a population of only 56,000 people, spread across dozens of settlements along a coastline longer than the distance from New York to Los Angeles. The Danish government, which controls Greenland, maintains some infrastructure, but the scale of the challenge is staggering. When multiple towns get hit simultaneously, which happens regularly during winter storms, there simply aren't enough helicopters, enough equipment, enough personnel to respond everywhere at once. Triage becomes necessary. Some towns wait days, sometimes weeks, for help to arrive. And in a moment, you'll see why this waiting period reveals something deeply disturbing about the hidden fragility of modern Arctic life. Something that challenges everything we assume about safety and civilization. Because here's what nobody tells you about snow-blocked Arctic towns. The danger isn't just physical isolation, it's the cascading failures that happen when infrastructure collapses. Start with power. Many Greenlandic settlements rely on diesel generators for electricity. Those generators need fuel. Fuel comes in by ship or truck. When access routes are blocked, fuel can't be delivered. Generators have maybe 2 weeks of reserve fuel. After that, the power goes out. No power means no heat in a place where temperatures routinely hit -40 degrees Fahrenheit. No heat means buildings become uninhabitable in hours. Pipes freeze and burst. Water systems fail. But it gets worse. Most settlements have small medical clinics, not hospitals. Serious medical emergencies require evacuation to Nuuk, the capital, or even Denmark. When weather prevents evacuation flights, people die from conditions that would be routine to treat elsewhere. A heart attack in New York? You're in surgery within an hour. A heart attack in a snow-blocked Greenlandic town? You hope you survive long enough for the weather to clear. And then there's food. Unlike mainland communities that can stockpile weeks of supplies, Arctic settlements face unique challenges. Fresh food is expensive and spoils quickly, so most places rely on regular shipments. When those shipments stop, you're left with whatever's in the store. In some smaller settlements, that's maybe 3 to 5 days of food for the whole community. After that, people start rationing. After a week, they're hunting and fishing in extreme conditions just to eat. Now here's where this story takes an unexpected turn, because the most dangerous aspect of snow-blocked streets isn't the snow itself. It's human behavior under pressure. Isolation does strange things to communities. When you're cut off from the world, social dynamics shift. Small tensions become major conflicts. In a place where everyone knows everyone, where there's no privacy and nowhere to escape, cabin fever sets in fast. Domestic violence rates spike during extended isolation periods. Alcohol consumption increases. Mental health crises multiply. And there's no outside help coming. The police, if the town even has police, are just as trapped as everyone else. But let's get back to the snow, because there's a specific type of drift formation that turns streets into death traps. And understanding it reveals why even experienced Arctic residents sometimes don't survive their own neighborhoods. Snowdrifts don't form randomly. They follow patterns based on wind direction, building placement, and terrain. In Greenlandic towns, buildings are often painted bright colors: red, blue, yellow, green, not just for aesthetics, but for visibility during whiteout conditions. When snow drifts hit, these buildings create wind shadows. Behind each building, snow accumulates at different rates. Between buildings, the wind accelerates, creating channels called wind streets, where snow moves even faster. These wind streets can bury a person in seconds. Now imagine you're a resident who needs to reach the store 2 buildings away. You step outside. Visibility is maybe 10 feet. You know the route by heart. But the street isn't where it was yesterday. The snow has reshaped everything. What was flat ground is now a maze of drifts reaching second-story windows. You're navigating by memory through a transformed environment where familiar landmarks have vanished. One wrong turn, and you're lost 30 feet from home. People have died this way, frozen within shouting distance of safety because they couldn't find the door. And here's the really insane part. Even after the storm passes, even after the wind stops and visibility returns, the danger doesn't end. Those massive snowdrifts don't just sit there harmlessly. They're unstable. Temperature fluctuations cause them to shift and collapse. Walking on top of a drift can send you plunging through into a cavity below. Essentially, a snow cave that forms when wind creates air pockets. Fall into one of those, and you're buried alive, possibly invisible from the surface. suffocating under tons of snow while rescue workers walk right past you. So how do communities actually deal with this? What's the real-world response when an entire town gets buried? The answer is both impressive and deeply inadequate. Most Greenlandic settlements have some snow removal equipment, usually a few aging snowplows and front loaders. But this equipment was designed for normal snowfall, not Arctic drift conditions. The machines overheat, hydraulics fail in extreme cold, metal becomes brittle and snaps. Operators work in shifts because exposure limits prevent anyone from staying outside too long. They prioritize critical routes, the path to the power plant, the clinic, the store. Everything else waits. Meanwhile, residents help themselves. Able-bodied people form crews, digging out doorways, creating narrow paths between buildings. They use whatever tools they have, shovels, pieces of plywood, even their hands. It's exhausting, dangerous work in brutal conditions. And it's temporary. Another storm will erase everything they've accomplished. This isn't a one-time disaster you recover from. It's a recurring siege that happens multiple times every winter. But here's what makes this truly wild. Despite all these challenges, people choose to live this way. Greenland's coastal towns aren't emptying. Families who have lived there for generations stay. Young people leave for education, but many come back. Why? The answer reveals something profound about human resilience. For many Greenlanders, these settlements aren't just where they live. They're who they are. Inuit culture has survived in the Arctic for thousands of years by adapting to extreme conditions. Modern challenges are just the latest version of an ancient struggle. And there's something else. The beauty. When the storms clear and sun returns, the Arctic landscape is otherworldly. Icebergs the size of office buildings float past. The northern lights paint the sky in impossible colors. The silence is so complete, you can hear your heartbeat. For people who grew up there, nowhere else compares. So we're left with a paradox. Technology hasn't made Arctic life easier. In some ways, it's made it more vulnerable. Reliance on external supply chains, fuel deliveries, evacuation flights, all these modern conveniences become catastrophic weaknesses when snow blocks access routes. Meanwhile, traditional survival skills that sustained people for millennia, hunting, fishing, navigation by stars and landmarks, are being lost as younger generations adopt modern lifestyles. And this brings us to the bigger question. What does this tell us about the limits of human habitation? Climate change is making Arctic weather more extreme and unpredictable. Scientists warn that Greenland will experience more frequent and severe storms. The very ice sheet that creates these deadly katabatic winds is melting, destabilizing weather patterns across the region. At some point, potentially within our lifetimes, some Greenlandic settlements may become genuinely uninhabitable during winter months. The cost of maintaining them, of repeatedly rescuing cut-off communities, may exceed any reasonable budget. But abandonment creates its own crisis. Where do displaced Arctic communities go? What happens to cultural identity when the land itself becomes the enemy? These questions are playing out right now in Alaska, northern Canada, and Siberia. The snow blocking Greenland streets today is a microcosm of a larger truth. There are limits to where we can live, and climate change is revealing those limits faster than we're prepared to adapt. So the next time you see a blizzard warning, remember what's happening in Greenland. Snow can be more than an inconvenience. Isolation can be deadly. The infrastructure we take for granted depends on conditions remaining within certain parameters. Step outside those parameters, and civilization gets fragile fast. If this deep dive into Arctic survival fascinated you, consider subscribing for more videos exploring the extremes of human geography. Hit that like button if you learned something new, and drop a comment. Would you ever live in a place where snow could trap you for weeks? What would it take for you to choose that life? The stories from Greenland's snow-blocked towns remind us that humans are both incredibly resilient and desperately vulnerable. We can adapt to almost anything, build communities in the harshest places, and find beauty in landscapes that seem designed to kill us. But we can also be humbled in an instant by forces we can't control. A wall of snow, a shift in wind. And maybe that's the real lesson. Not that we shouldn't live in extreme places, but that we need to respect the environments we inhabit. The Arctic doesn't care about our plans or infrastructure. It operates by rules written in ice and wind, rules that existed long before humans arrived and will continue long after we're gone. The people of Greenland know this. They live it every winter. When the snow comes and the winds howl and the drifts rise higher than houses, they endure. They dig. They wait. They survive. Because that's what humans do in the Arctic, where snow can bury an entire town overnight. Adaptation means accepting that sometimes you're at the mercy of forces far greater than yourself. Stay curious, stay informed, and never underestimate snow. Links in the description for further reading on Arctic survival and climate impacts. Until next time.